Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are studying the chapter 20 of the second book of Chronicles, that is Perek Chaf of Divrei Hayomim Bet. We are still reading of the reign and career of King Yehoshaphat, who was the son of King Asa, and this represented a period of time when Yehuda was at least on the right path. The leaders were leading them on the path towards God. Asa and Yehoshaphat, both for the most part, were loyal to God. Asa having had some issues that we read about several chapters ago, and Yehoshaphat being criticized for his alliance with the northern kingdom. While on one level, some may see his attempt to reconcile and his attempt to rebuild alliances with the Northern Kingdom as something positive, and maybe in a broad sense, at least in principle, it might be something positive. But because the Northern Kingdom was so steeped in idol worship and evil and was being led by Achav, or King Ahab, who was one of the worst offenders in this arena, then creating alliances, in this case through marriage, with the house of Achav was probably not the best idea, which is why we found the prophet criticizing Yehoshaphat in the previous chapter. This chapter is not going, for the most part, won't be dwelling on this mistake of Yehoshaphat, but on an incident that occurred, which interestingly is not recorded in the book of Kings when the book of Kings discusses Yehoshaphat's career. As we know from all of the kings whose histories we review in both the book of Kings and here, there is mention of, if you want to know the rest of the history and all the stories and the wars, go look in the books, the chronicles of the kings of Israel or the kings of Judah, etc. So there's lots of events that were recorded in history books, but the ones that were placed in the books of the prophets in both the Kings and Chronicles were specifically chosen because they were stories that delivered a particular message. So the writer of the book of Kings did not feel that this story necessarily belonged in the book, but the writer of the book of Chronicles did. And it's not super surprising when we remember the book of Chronicles and the time it was written and the purpose, basically in a time when he was trying to set the people as they began to build the second temple and to build the second commonwealth, the second attempt at building a nation in the land of Israel, that they should emphasize the importance of faithfulness to God. We will also find in this chapter it's somewhat unusual in that the way the wars were fought, not as unusual in a bad way, but it's presented as unusual in a good way, but unusual in that so far all of the wars we've had, of course, many times where the people, the leaders, would seek advice of the prophets, would engage in prayer, or beseeching God for help and success. Of course, that happened many times, but the level to which that occurred and how it occurred amongst the entire people, men, women, children, etc., which we're about to read in chapter 20, this is something different, of a different nature than what we're used to. So let's read it, and we will. You can judge on your own how you incorporate this into your understanding of Yehoshaphat, the way he led the people, and how he dealt with a serious crisis. So it was after this occurred. So that was after Yehoshaphat we had just read about how he set up judges around the land, and everything was moving along really nicely. But then Bo b'nei Moav uvnei Ammon v'imahem meha Ammonim al Yehoshaphat la milchama. Yehoshaphat, who and it's important to note it was after these events. So Yehoshaphat would be thinking now, okay, I've done everything right. I have sent out teachers to teach Torah. I have sent out judges. I have set up a system that is just and right and righteous and is proper. I have been destroying places of idol worship and focusing people's attention on worship of God in the temple and keeping God's commandments, etc. I have been right on the right track. So you can imagine that this was kind of an event where all of a sudden the Bnei Moab, the Moabites, Ubnei Ammon, and the Ammonites, V'imahem, and together with them, a another group of people from the Ammonim, and I'm going to discuss this in a minute, who these people are or might be, make this huge alliance against Yehoshaphat. One would think that this is the time for peace, right? Everything is going great. God should give them peace, but no, this massive army then arrays against them of three groups of allies. Now, the Bnei Moab and Bnei Ammon we're familiar with, the Moabites and the Ammonites. They are familiar figures at various times throughout the Tanakh. They are enemies. Sometimes they are subdued. Sometimes they are allies. For the most part, they were neighbors with the rocky relationship of the people of Israel. And so that they are attacking shouldn't surprise us too much. But together with them, there's this group of Ammonim, which obviously looks like members of the people of Ammon. But if that's the case, then why are they separated from the Bnei Ammon? Why aren't they just part of the Ammonites, which we just mentioned? And then with them, from some of the Ammonim. And then later in this chapter, we are going to read of people from Har Seir, for which generally means Edomites, which is a third group, right? And it seems that these Ammonim are actually Edomites. So they may have been so there's a lot of suggestions in the commentaries and tradition as to exactly who these people were. So the tradition has it that they were actually Edomites that were pretending to be Ammonites or somehow pretending to be a tribe from the Ammonites, which becomes important and interesting when we learn of how this attack eventually, and I don't want to give too much away about what's going to happen, how it fell apart because of this tenuous alliance here. But either way, so we have these three groups of nations, this group of three nations, sorry, coming and waging war against Yehoshaphat. Vayavo, vayagidu Yehoshaphat lemar, and the report came to Yehoshaphat saying as follows: Ba'alecha hamon rav, there is coming upon you a great number of people me'ever layam, from across the uh, sea, like me'aram, from Aram. Um, so this Eber Layam presumably is the Yam Kinneret, now also known as the Sea of Galilee, from Aram, from Syria, which is interesting too, because Syria is farther north than where these groups of people lived. So they may have allied themselves with Arameans, and we're very familiar with the Aramean enemy, as they are the enemy. We hear of their fighting with the northern kingdom, which makes sense geographically. So they may have allied themselves with some of with Aram as well. Tamar, but now they are where are they camped? They are camped in Chatzitzon Tamar Hi Ein Gedi, which is another name for Ein Gedi, which brings us much farther south on the shores of the Dead Sea. So which does make sense given these groups of Bnei Moab and Bnei Ammon. So there's a large group of people coming from east of the Jordan, and exactly who's attacking is a little bit of a mishkabobble geographically, but which could be some level of confusion in the history, or it could be that there is just a large group of people from all of those places, from Aram, from and so on, which even more so explains why Yehoshaphat and his people were so afraid. Vayira vayitein Yehoshaphat espanav. Remember, and it would make sense too that Aram would be involved. Aram was the enemy that had fought against Achav, the northern kingdom, and Aram looks at Yehuda now as an ally of the northern kingdom. and Aram and the northern kingdom of Israel are implacable enemies. So they would consider Yehoshaphat to be an enemy too. So if they were involved, that would make sense. But meanwhile, the groups attacking are the Moabites, Ammonites, and these Ammonim that we discussed before, that may be Edomites. So Vayira, and he was afraid. Vayitain Yehoshaphat es panav lidrosh Adonai. So what did he do? He turned his face. Literally, that's what it means. But it means he decided to seek out God. And here we're using again the word lidrosh. And I know I emphasize this a million times, but lidrosh means to find from God, what should I do? How do I handle this crisis? By Yikrat Som I'll call Yehuda. And he called out a fast day for the entire Judah. Let us fast. And this is how to be doresh, to seek out the advice of God. Okay, Vayikavtzu Yehuda, and all the people of Judah came, the people from all around the kingdom came, Levakesh me Adonai, and here it's different, to pray from God. And this time they're praying, presumably they're praying, right, to be saved. So this is different than Lidrosh. Gam Mikol Yehuda, from all the cities of Yehuda, they came Levakeshes Adonai, to beg God for help. Vayamod Yehoshaphat B'Kahal Yehuda v'Yerushalayim Beveis Adonai, and Yehoshaphat stood in front of the entire congregation of Yehuda and the congregation of Jerusalem, in other words, the people from all around and the people, the local Jerusalemites, in the house of God, Lifnei HaChatzer HaChadashah, before the new Chatzer, the new courtyard. Exactly what this means, the new courtyard, is unclear. We don't have any official report of the courtyard being rebuilt or of a new courtyard being built. Presumably, Yehoshaphat must have done some work to renew. This is what many of the commentaries assume, to fix up the walls, to fix up the building. So therefore, it's called the new one. Because at Yehoshaphat might have been renewed. Although this is the only place where it's hinted that such an event occurred. Vayomer Adonai Elohei Avosenu, and he said, God, the Lord of our forefathers, Halo Atahu Elohim Bashamayim, you are the God in the heavens. V'atah Moshel, and you are the ruler b'chol mamlechos hagoyim, over all of the kingdoms of all of the nations of the world. Uv'yodcha koach u'gvura, and in your hand there is strength and power. V'einim chalis yatsev, and no one can stand against you. That no one can stand in your together with you and against you. No one is your equal. You have power over everything. Haloata Eloheinu, and you are God. Ho rashtas yoshvei aretz azos. You have the best translation I see for this is dispossessed those that had inhabited this land milifnei amcha Yisrael, before your nation Israel. We conquered this land from the people that lived here before, Vatitna, and you gave this land Lizera Avram, to the descendants of Abraham, Ohavcha, he who loved you, La'olam, forever. This is our land, this is our inheritance. Vayeshvuva, and they settled in this land, Vayivnu Lucha, and they built in your honor, in this land, Mikdash, a temple, Lishimcha, in the honor of your name. Lamar saying as follows, right? In other words, the people, when they built this, they declared the following: Im tavo aleinu ra'a, when evil or misfortune or bad things come upon us, cherev, or whether that badness, whether that suffering is cherev, from sword, shifot, or some sort of bad judgment against us, right? Sorry, cherev shifot is a phrase. In other words, the judgment of sword against us, v'dever, or plague, v'rav, or hunger. Na'amdol lifnei habayis hazeh, we will stand before this house, u'lefanechan, before you, God, kishimcha b'bayis hazeh, because it is your name that is represented in this house. V'nizak elechan, we will cry out to you, mitzarasenu, because of our suffering, v'tishma, and you will listen to our prayer, v'toshia, and you will save us. V'ata, and now, hine, and this tiny little history lesson is important, because it turns out that b'nei Ammon u'Moavi Har Seir, those who live, the Ammonites and Moabites, and those who live in Har Seir, who are Edomites, like I said. So the third group here he's mentioning is not Meha Ammonim, but people from Har Seir, which is why I said they may have been Edomites. Asher lo nasata li Yisrael lavovahem. You did not allow the people of Israel to take their land away. So they really have no claim against us. Like it would be one thing if the people who we had dispossessed were fighting back, right? At least they have some claim. But these guys have nothing on us. We didn't do anything to them, and they're coming to attack us, right? When they, in other words, us, when people of Israel were leaving the land of Egypt and coming here, we passed by their land. We turned from them. We didn't go through their land. We didn't conquer. We didn't take away. We did not destroy them. We did not fight against them. But now they are coming, and this is how they're repaying us, to come and kick us out, from the inheritance that you gave us, right? They're coming to kick us out of our land. They're not defending themselves. This is a completely unwarranted attack. So what he's doing here is placing the justice before God, right? He's saying, listen, it would be one thing if it was from the seven nations, then they have a just claim, or they have a claim at least, and then there's a fight, there's something, right? But here there's no justice to their claim. This is totally out of pure malice, that they're coming to fight against us, and they have no claim over us, and so therefore God be on our side, right? Surely you should judge them appropriately according to justice, because we don't have the strength. We don't have the numbers. We don't have the strength to fight against this great number of people that are coming against us. And we do not know what to do. And this is why our eyes turn towards you. Right? We don't know how to handle this. Therefore, we come to you in prayer. And all of the people of Judah were standing before God. Everyone, including the children, the women, and their children. So Tapam meaning the young children, of Uvnehem meaning presumably the children that aren't considered taf, a little bit older. So this is the prayer that they place before God, and God answers them through a prophet. Verse 14, V'Yachaziel, and the prophet by the name of Yachaziel, who was Ben Zechariah, Ben Benayah, Ben Yeiel, Ben Matanya. That was his lineage, all the way up to Matanya Halevi, Min Bnei Asaf, who was one of the children of Asaf. Ha'isa alav ruach Adonai, the Spirit of God was upon him, when he was standing there among the congregation. And as he received the prophecy, he then transmitted the prophecy to everyone. Vayomer, and he said as follows, Hakshivu chol Yehuda, listen all of Judah, v'yoshvei Yerushalayim, and those that are residents of Jerusalem, v'yamelech Yehoshaphat, and listen, King Yehoshaphat. Ko amar Adonai lachem, so says God to you, atem al tiru, do not be afraid, v'al techatu, and do not be terrified from before this tremendous army that's coming against you. Because this war will not be yours to fight. This will be God's war to fight. Machar, tomorrow, go against them, right? He doesn't say, stay here in the temple and pray, right? You got to get up and go to war. You have to make your effort. You have to put up the fight that you can, even if you realize that you're far outnumbered. Because they are coming up the ascent of Tzitz, which would be a ascent from the region of Ein Gedi towards Jerusalem. That's the route that they will be taking. And you will greet them, in other words, your camp, as you march out against them to battle. You will find them at this point, at the end of the wadi, at the end of the riverbed, which happens to be at the beginning of the wilderness of Yeruel. Lo lachem lilachem bezos. But it won't be for you to wage war against them. In other words, go greet them in battle, be ready. But in the end, you will not need to fight. But what's going to happen is hisyatzvu, you will stand imdu, you will wait uru, and you will see as Yeshuas Adonai Imachem, you will see the deliverance of God, that He will deliver you, Yehuda Yerushalayim. That will be with you, both Judah and people of Judah and people from Jerusalem. Al tiruv al techatu, do not be terrified, do not be afraid. Machar tzulivneim, go out and greet them in war. Adonai Imachem, God will be with you. Vayikod Yehoshaphat apayim arza. Yehoshaphat, the king, bowed twice. He bowed. I'm sorry, not twice. He bowed to with his face to the ground. V'chol Yehuda v'Yerushalayim, and all of Judah and the residents of Jerusalem, all together, naflu lifnei Adonai, they fell and prostrated themselves lishtachavos, to bow Adonai, to God. Vayakumu halaviyim b'nei hakasim u'b'nei hakirachim, and the Levites, the leaders from the family of the Kehatim, of the Kahat family of Levites, and the Korach family of Levites, they got up lahalel Adonai, to say praises to God, Eloi Yisrael, God the Lord of Israel, b'kol gadol l'mala, with a great voice, with a tremendous amount of very loud. So here you have loud singing of praise to God, right? Before the battle, this was how they stirred the people's hearts and gave them the courage to go out to battle, with the promise that God would help them, and that in the end they wouldn't even need to fight. But to go to fight, they had to do. By Ashkimu Vaboker, and they all wake up in the morning, they get up early, Midbar Tekoa, and they went out to the wilderness of Tekoa, Uvitsei Sam, and as they were going out, Omad Yehoshaphat stood Vayomer Shimouni. Listen to me, Yehuda, people of Judah, V'yosh Yerushalayim, and residents of Jerusalem, Ha'aminu, Ba'adonai Elohechem V'tei Amenu. Have trust in God, the Lord your God, V'tei Amenu, and you will stand steady, you will stand solid. Ha'aminu b'neviyav, have trust in his prophets, v'yatzlichu, and you will be successful. Right? So he is telling them you will be successful in a manner that, have faith, have trust in God, and you will stand strong. You will be successful in this mission of going out to greet them in battle, and just do what you got to do. So vayivatz el ha'am, and after he had taken counsel from the nation, presumably that was referring to the events that we had just occurred, right? Vayamed mishorim ladonai, and he appointed and set up singers to God, halalim lahadash kodesh, and those who are singing praise to the glory of His holiness. B'tseis lifnei chalutz, when they were going out before those that were armed, right? The Omrim, and they were saying, Hodu ladonai ki li'olam chasto. This is the reminiscent of Psalms. Give praise to God because God's kindness is forever. Keeping the people morale up, singing songs of praise to God, going out to battle. This is an image that we really don't find. I mean, of course, we find references to God in battle, but to this extent, and this amount of prayer of the entire community, and singing to God while marching to war, and a prophet prophesizing during the prayer about success in war. This is an image that's different, and it's a different kind of image than we've ever had in Tanakh up to this point. It's a very different kind of image, and it's the image that the chronicler wants to present of Yehoshaphat going to battle in this desperate situation where he was far outnumbered, and obviously the people were very afraid that they were going to suffer terribly at the hands of the marching enemy. And when they began to sing, in other words, so it seems like they reached the point where they were in front of the other, they reached the front line where they met with their enemy, and they began to sing and give the people strength, and give the people and inspire their faith in God, and get them ready for the upcoming fight. At this point, all of a sudden, Nasan Adonai me'arvim al bnei Ammon Moav v'Har Seir haboim liYuda v'yinogefu. God made it that there were me'arvim. Me'arvim are ambush bushes, right? That came and attacked the people of Bnei Ammon, Moab, and the people of Edom that were coming to Yehuda, and they were struck hard by these ambushers. Who were these ambushers? It's not clear from the text. It doesn't say who they were. Were they just roving bandits that saw a wealthy army and figured they would attack? Is it some mysterious group of people? Is it Me'arvim? We don't know. So a tradition has it, and as we see in the next verses, is that what it is actually ambushers that were from within this group. This was a hodgepodge group of nations, many of which were enemies to each other that had simply made peace in order to attack their common enemy, which was Judah. So from within the camp, they started attacking each other, and it could be that it has something to do with these with the people that were actually Edomites that were either pretending to be or masquerading as Ammonites somehow didn't really like the Ammonites and started fighting. So we don't know exactly. It's not clear from the verse, but there's all kinds of attempts to understand it along the lines of what I just described. But the bottom line, which is important, is that the people of Judah were standing there ready to fight this desperate battle, praying to God, singing to God, and before any fighting happened, they see the entire camp arrayed against them, breaking down in disarray because of attacks that are coming out of nowhere. So Vayamdu b'nei Ammon u'Moav al Yoshvei Har Seir. So then the people of Ammon and Moab turned against those who were the Seirites, the Edomites among them, right? I keep saying Edomites, even though the term is not used in the verse, because those are the ones who generally reside on Har Seir, and we know that from many other places in Tanakh in the Bible. So I'm making that assumption that they're Edomites. So just take my word for that. If you don't like it, that's fine. If you have another understanding, that's fine. It could, but the residents of Har Seir, who generally are associated with the Edomites, but either way, so they start fighting amongst each other, right? So what it sounds like is there were some attacks coming from the side, and the people of Ammon and Moab immediately turned and blamed the Edomites among them. So they started fighting against their own camp, lahacharim ulashmid, to destroy them and crush them. Uchechalosam biyoshvei seir, and as they um, began to destroy and attack the residents of Seir, the Edomites, right? Azru ish each person helped his friend to destroy even more. So in other words, there was tons of fighting one with the other. No one knew who the enemy was. No one knew who the friend was. It was complete bedlam and people killing each other left and right within the camp. For Yehuda ba'al mitzpel midbar, and when Yehuda, the people of Judah, came to the lookout over the wilderness where they were going to, and they were looking down upon the enemy, Vayifnu el ha'amon, and they looked at this tremendous camp that was coming against them, and instead of seeing an army poised to attack, they see v'hinam pigarim noflim arza. They see people dying everywhere. V'ein pleta, and there's no one even running away. They had been killing each other to the extent that there weren't even remnants of the army running and screaming. They were all just dead. Vayavo Yehoshaphat v'amo. So Yehoshaphat and his nation then sees this entire camp full of weapons and chariots and horses and metals of all kinds and all sorts of good stuff. So Yehoshaphat and the people of Yehuda went lavos eshalalam to take all of the booty by imtzu v'hem larov, and they found among the people lots and lots of booty, v'ruchush, much precious things, ufigarim, and dead and corpses on the field. Each one, of course, has a uniform and a shield and armor, uchlei chamudos, and many valuable objects. By lahem, and they emptied out the camp, la'ain masa, to the extent that they couldn't even carry it. Vayehi yamim shlosha, and for 3 days, bozuzim es hashol kiravu, they were collecting the booty from the destroyed camp because there was so much of it. Vayom haravi, and on the fourth day, nikalu, they all gathered le'emek bracha at the Emek, the valley of blessing, kisham berchu es Adonai, because in that valley is where they blessed God. Al kain karu Hashem hamakom ahu emek bracha hayom. That's why this place is called the Valley of Blessing until this day. So, presumably, this blessing could refer to the blessing of God they did prior to the battle, and they named that Emek Bracha because that's where the blessing took place. Or it could mean that the blessing was what they did afterwards to thank God, or it could mean both. It probably means both. So now, Vayashuvu Kol Yehuda, all of the people of Judah, Yerushalayim, and Jerusalem, Yehoshaphat, Rosham, and their king Yehoshaphat in the lead, they all went Lashuv el Yerushalayim, to return to Jerusalem besimcha, with happiness, ki simcham Adonai me'avihem, because God brought them rejoicing and happiness because of their victory over their enemies. Vayavo Yerushalayim, they came to Jerusalem b'nevalimu v'kinarosu v'chatzotzrosu beis Adonai, with all kinds of musical instruments, harps and lyres and trumpets. They came to the temple of God to celebrate their tremendous victory. When the people, other nations around, saw what had happened, the fear of God came upon all of the other kingdoms that were in the area, when they heard that God himself fought the battle with the enemies of Israel. So the remainder of the time of the kingdom of Yehoshaphat was quiet. Vayanoch lo Elohav misaviv, and his God, right, gave him peace from all of the surrounding potential enemies. He had peace and quiet. Vayimloch Yehoshaphat, we're almost finished with the career of Yehoshaphat, so I know this is a little bit long, but I'll go all the way to the end of this chapter. Vayimloch Yehoshaphat al Yehuda. Yehoshaphat was the king over Judah. Ben Shloshim Chamesh Shana, he became the king when he was 35 years. B'malcho. And he was king for 25 years. So, his mother was Azuvah, the daughter of Shilchi. And he went and he led the people along the path that his father Asa did. He did not turn away. For he did that which was proper in the eyes of God. However, it wasn't perfect. Habamos lo saru, the high places, the places of worship where people worship outside the temple, were not removed. And the nation had still not truly set their hearts on worshiping God, the God of their forefathers. There was still idol worship, despite all of the efforts of Asa and Yehoshaphat. The people still needed a lot of work. They were still not all there, which leads us to what's about to happen, because the work was not done. Once another king comes up who starts bringing the people in the other direction, the people immediately flip back to their evil ways, which we'll find out later. But in the meantime, in the days of Yehoshaphat, the Eser Divrei Yehoshaphat, verse 34, and the remainder of the things that occurred, the events that occurred of Yehoshaphat, Harishonim, Yachonim, during his early days of his reign and in the later days of his reign. If you want to read the history, Hinam Ksuvim B'Divrei Yehu ben Hanani, they are written in the words of Yehu, the son of Hanani. This is a prophet who spoke prophecy in the last chapter, who criticized Yehoshaphat for his alliance with Achav, if you remember. But he was also, and we find this in other places, the prophet is also a scribe, Asher Ho'ala al Sefer Malchei Yisrael, because he had included all of these events in the books which recorded the events of the history of the kings of Israel. So if you want to read about them, you can read in the book that was written by the prophet Yehu ben Hanani. His father Hanani might be the same as Hanani the prophet, although Hanani it seems to have been a common name at the time, so that's unclear. But it would seem that way. After this, Yehoshaphat, the king of Yehuda, had entered into a compact, an alliance with Achaziah. Achaziah is the son of Achav, the king of Israel. So Yehoshaphat continues his attachment and his attempt at alliances with the king of Israel. And in this he had done something evil, he had done something bad. So as much as Yehoshaphat was good, this number one, we mentioned before that the Bamot were still there, right? The places of worship outside the temple remained, and the people were not fully, even though he had attempts at educating them and provide and making justice and the system of justice, etc., and teaching and so on. Despite all of his efforts, the people hadn't done it. And also, he continued on this path of attempting to make an alliance with people he should not have made alliances with and specifically with Achaziah, the son, who was the son of Achav, right? And we learned of the death of Achav in the previous chapter. And he continued that relationship with Achaziah, the king of Israel. And we're going to see soon in the upcoming chapters how this alliance really turned things bad in Yehuda after Yehoshaphat leaves the scene. But one of the things he tried to do with Achaziah, in addition to having the families married together, he tried to do joint ventures. And one of those joint ventures is a little interesting historical note. By Chabrehu Imo, he made a joint venture with him, la'asos aniyos, to build ships, lolechet Tarshish, ships to go to Tarshish. Presumably that is somewhere in the Mediterranean. Vayasu aniyos be'etzion gaver, and they made ships in Etzion Gaver. So they made ships and they tried to build ships that would be seaworthy enough to make it all the way, presumably for trade, in order to build up the wealth of both kingdoms. Vayisnabe Eliezer ben Dodavahu mimoresha, and the Navi Eliezer, the son of Dodavahu, who was from Maresha. Maresha is a community that we're familiar with. Nowadays, it's well known as the town of Beit Guvrin, and which has incredibly interesting archaeological sites there that one can see today. A very popular place to go to. But Maresha is a town of prophets. We know Micha, the famous prophet Micah, came from there, and this Eliezer also came from Maresha, and he gave prophecy al Yehoshaphat regarding Yehoshaphat Lamar, saying as follows: as soon as you have made an alliance with Achaziyahu, God there and or because of and as you have made that alliance with him, God has God will break your work. He will make your work unsuccessful because you're making this partnership with someone who you shouldn't be partners with. Therefore, God will make sure that it is unsuccessful. The ships broke up. They never made it to Tarshish. I guess they had bad construction or whatever. Maybe they got stuck in a storm or whatever it was. It was an unsuccessful venture that was attempted, and as the prophet prophesied, because Yehoshaphat had made an alliance that he should not have. And the real problem with the alliance we will learn of in the upcoming chapters as we see after the kingdom of Asa and Yehoshaphat were at least moving the people in the right direction. We're going to see things go into a tailspin in the wrong direction. So thank you so much for studying chapter 20 with me. It was a bit long, but a very interesting chapter of a very interesting event that is only recorded here in the book of Chronicles, from which we learn a lot about how Yehoshaphat ruled, how he approached God, and how he led the people, and this incredible miraculous deliverance from what seemed to be a terrible threat. Thank you so much again. Looking forward to studying chapter 21 and the rest of this book together. Have a wonderful day.